I've always been under the assumption that franchises like The Last of Us or Halo or Uncharted, they're all best enjoyed when played one after the other. This allows us to continue the momentum of playing one game right into its sequel and builds up for this bigger and more enjoyable experience. Earlier this week, I was doing a deep clean of my gaming area. I was dusting off shelves, pretending to be productive, and I found a Yakuza game that I'd purchased a couple years back, and it was still wrapped in plastic, never had been opened. Going through a few other shelves, I found another, and I ended up with 7 different Yakuza games in total, each of them also never having been opened. I thought about how I'd love to sit down and just play through all of them, completely immersing myself in their world, experiencing a seamless narrative that would help me develop these stronger emotional connections to the characters. There'd be this sense of accomplishment going through the games, and then firsthand I'd be able to see the evolution of the series as it's adapted to different industry standards over the years. But there are also 10 main games in the Yakuza series right now, and if I were to sit down and play through each one, that's a runtime of over 240 hours. To only play the Yakuza games until I finish them, it would take over half a year going by the average time someone in North America plays games every week. And that's also without getting into any of the extra content these games have in them. With that amount of time, I'm guaranteed to burn out. Although it wouldn't happen all the time. Like with burnout, it comes and goes, but while it was there, what would happen to my experience playing the games? What areas or places would I want to skip? What moments would I no longer enjoy? What if some aspects I'd normally like began to feel repetitive? And what if moving from game to game left me with this narrative overload? I love video games. They are my favorite medium of storytelling. Anytime I play a game, I want to experience it in the best way possible. Now, the alternative to this, if I spaced out the games and played others in between, it would take a lot longer to see everything that Yakuza has to offer. I might forget important details or things that happened. There's even the risk of losing interest between games and then not picking it back up again. On the other hand, taking breaks between the different Yakuza games might enhance my appreciation for them. There'd also be time to reflect on the story and gameplay of each game after completing them. Plus, what if I'm more excited to play the later installments because of the anticipation of waiting to pick up the next one? I always thought the hype of a sequel came from knowing that it's not out yet, and then wanting to play it but knowing I'll have to wait until it releases. Playing a game day one of launch is far more exciting than picking up the game 3 years later after it's already released. Or is it? How much of a difference does that context actually add to the hype of the game? And does it really make that much of a difference in the long-term value of playing it? I mean, I still remember waiting outside Best Buy to get my hands on the Nintendo Wii, although they sold out before we were able to get one. And I also still remember waiting outside EB Games the night of StarCraft 2's launch. And while those are super fond memories of mine, I don't think either one had any impact on my actual enjoyment of the game itself. So here's what I propose. I would like to do an experiment. I'd like to find out what's more enjoyable. Is it playing a franchise from start to finish? Or is it slowly working through a franchise and playing a variety of different games in between each of its titles? I'd also like to set this up in a way where we can do the experiment together and you can pick your own franchise if you'd like. I personally believe that going through a franchise's games one after the other without playing different games in between will be a little bit more taxing, but will build to a greater and more enjoyable outcome. I don't know the fine details of how this experiment will work yet, but I think I'd like to play the first 3 Yakuza games in a row, and then leave a few months gap between them and the 4th one. This will let me test the continuation of playing multiple games together with enough time that some of the negatives should start to surface, and then there's enough of a gap until the 4th where I can see the effects of coming back to it after so much time. What I like about the Yakuza games is that they are story games, and most of them are not maybe direct sequels to each other, but there is a chronological timeline of events within the world that references things that happened in previous games, and there's recurring characters, and there's also a ton of well-done side quests and extra content within the game. It's one of the biggest things I always hear people raving about. There's even supposed to be this wooden card derby thing that it's like 15 hours of playthrough to get through all of it. People rave that it's just as good as the main story with the story that goes on with that, so. But we're not just gonna go at this all silly-willy. I wanna do it seriously. We're gonna get qualitative and quantitative data points, collection templates, an experiment plan. We're gonna go all the way with it. There's also a fair bit of planning that would need to be done, so this won't be starting right away. And I'm thinking maybe the 18th of March is a good date. Gives enough time to work out the nuances of all of it. It's also something that people can just join whenever, and I want to set this up so that even if someone finds this later and they just want to be a part of the experiment, they can add their data to it at a future point, and then we can come back and reference things later on and see how it's changed as more people have participated, and I think that would be really cool. But yeah, the big thing is if you'd like to participate in the experiment, then start thinking about what franchise you'd like to use for this. You don't have to play the Yakuza games like I am, and it would work best with a franchise that you've never played before. Over the next couple weeks, we'll work out some of the different details over the Monday videos, and we'll put together something special. And at the end of the day, one might think, all right, come on, this is a little extreme, is it not? And to that I say, well, yeah, you might be right. I love that this experiment's come from my long-term journey to catalog and play through all the different video games that I've gotten over the last 14 years. And I expect that the results will play an important role in deciding how to tackle some of the bigger games and the different franchises that come up along the way. The theme of games I was going through this month were 3D platformers, and I managed to get 2 of those done this week. The first one was Smushy Come Home, which was a casual 3D platformer about a mushroom separated from its family, and it approached the 3D platformer genre with a bit of open world and exploration elements and collecting items to be able to get through the game. There was also Trifox, an action 3D platformer about a fox trying to recover his stolen TV remote after his house was attacked by these villains. And this one was a linear approach where you were jumping and fighting your way through different levels, unlocking different powers with coins you collected along the way. And I also got a recommendation to try out Everhood through the comments of last week's video. I think I'm almost halfway through the game so far. This isn't a 3D platformer, but I always love checking out game recommendations. So if anyone here also has some, please share them. Now for the progress of adding games into the database, we got a little over 90 games from my Switch's library put in, which I believe puts us at over half of my Switch titles. And then we've also got to figure out the theme that we want to do for next month's games. So if you've got any suggestions for that, leave them in the comments below. And otherwise, I'll see you next Monday.